As some of you may or may not know, President Trump has had a goal of creating more jobs in America. To accomplish this, he promotes increased production of fossil fuels, opening massive plots of lands for mining exploration, and even pulling the United States out of the Paris Agreement and rolling back the federal Clean Power Plan, which would allow Americans to use more fossil fuels. Fossil fuel production is not the right strategy for creating jobs in America. Renewable energy production, like solar and wind, will create more jobs compared to fossil fuel production in the future. I will support this claim by talking about three main points. Firstly, I will talk about how the production of renewable energy is much more labor intensive compared to fossil fuel production. Next, how the workforce for clean energy is already competing with the fossil fuel sector for jobs. And finally, how clean energy is being pushed forward by US laws and bills that require the transition out of fossil fuels. The production of renewable energy is much more labor intensive compared to fossil fuel production, which will result in more employment opportunities. As more renewable energies are implemented, there are going to be more jobs for production, assembly, and maintenance of renewable energy facilities. According to Forbes writer Mike Scott, more than 500,000 jobs around the world were created in the renewable energy sector in 2017, bringing the total number of people employed in the sector to more than 10 million for the first time. This shows that the renewable energy sector is growing and will continue to grow. Fossil fuel production does not hold on to its workforce as well. This is because there is no need for humans once the production plants are being created. According to the 2017 U.S. Energy and Employment Report, mining and extraction employers in fossil fuels project a decline in employment of nearly 12% during 2018. Renewable energy production also allows for smaller companies and larger companies to be in business together. This is due to smaller companies being able to supply solar panels to residential customers and larger companies supplying solar panel fields and wind turbines for industrial use. Fossil fuel production does not have this option. They are limited to having large industrial-sized projects like oil rigs, while not having the ability to have residential customers. Homeowners would not be able to set up a natural gas pump in their backyard for their private use. The second reason is that the workforce for renewable energy is already competing with the fossil fuel sector for jobs. Renewable energy workforces are growing massively compared to fossil fuels. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, the solar workforce increased by 25% in 2016, while wind employment increased by 32%. Siemens, a company that produces electricity with fossil fuels, was not as successful. Tina Casey, a writer for Clean Technica, stated, "The global demand for gas turbines with a capacity of more than 100 megawatts has taken a nosedive. Siemens has had to release around 6,900 employees because of this change. This shows that fossil fuel producers are already having to cut their employment numbers due to competition with renewable energy." Finally, the fact that laws and bills are requiring the transition out of fossil fuels. CBS News reported that in California, on September 10, 2018, a bill called SB 100 was signed into effect. SB 100 has the policy for 100% clean energy production by 2045. California is the fifth largest economy, so if this bill is successful, it will show the rest of the world that even for the largest economies, it is possible to transition to renewable energy. In Nevada, there are similar projects to transition to renewable energy. The Gemini Solar Project in Las Vegas is a solar panel field with a size of 44,000 acres. The construction is planned to begin in the third quarter of 2019, and as Betsy Lillian of Solar Industry says, has expectations to employ 3,800 total jobs and add up to $463 million in economic development value to the Nevada economy. Many states have similar goals for clean energy production. According to Inside Climate News, at least 8 states, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New York, Pennsylvania, and Vermont are pushing for renewable energy production goals in the near future. Many of these states have similar goals as California's SB 100 bill, which asks for a % amount of renewable energy usage by a certain date. Because of these reasons, it is obvious that the production of fossil fuels is not going to help the U.S. make more jobs. Renewable energy requires more manual labor and is impacting the fossil fuel workforce negatively already. On top of these reasons, it is becoming to law to get rid of fossil fuel production. So why would we want to put more jobs into a workforce that is disappearing as we speak? Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff at the beginning is pretty solid. There's a good preview. You signpost the individual points as you get to them, so I think you're doing okay there. There is kind of this built-in presupposition that it's disappearing, you know, the one industry is disappearing as the other one is growing. It does sound to me like you acknowledge at the end, though, that one of the reasons that the first industry is having problems is because the second one is being mandated by state laws and intervention by the government. So the question about whether or not it's competitive, whether or not it's economically viable, has less to do with the choices in the energy systems that we have, and more to do with government action on those particular points. And I think that that's part of the controversy on this issue, whether or not one organization or another should be favored, or whether we should be preferring one over the other. The trade-off on jobs on the second point, for instance, is interesting. You mentioned the increase in the number of solar and wind jobs by percentage. You mentioned the loss of jobs by the one company in the turbines that they're not producing by a number. And I don't know how to make the comparison between those things without some shared information about what's the total number, for instance, of solar jobs that have increased. It's likely to be comparable to those jobs that are lost by the one energy company. So it seems strange that we don't have that kind of follow-up. That's just a minor inconsistency on the data. I think you've got pretty good data to suggest the conclusion that you're talking about is a valid one. But that's one of those places where there's going to be some dispute. I do think that there's a tendency, for instance, to look at old forms of fossil fuel, like on that first point, when you talked about mining. I think coal mining is largely is disappearing. The other forms of fossil fuel that have been developing and have been producing jobs are largely absent from the discussion in your presentation, and that'll probably be a point that the response speaker will be dealing with on that first point. Probably a little bit more reading than you want during the presentation, but like I said, I thought you had pretty solid data. All right, thank you.